You want answers?
I think I'm entitled.
You want answers?
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth!
I'm sick and tired of hearing things from uptight, short-sighted, narrow-minded hypocritics. All I want is the truth. Just give me some truth.
Thanks for joining me today. This video about truth and unsound arguments is really directed at presuppositionalism. Those of you who do not know what presuppositionalism is, let me just briefly describe it. It's a school of thought that attempts to present a rational basis for the Christian faith. Presuppositionalists believe that truth comes solely through deduction from Scripture. The presuppositionalist does two things. First of all, he or she presupposes that the Bible is absolute truth. They take this as an absolute. Secondly, they try to expose contradictions and errors in other forms of epistemology, and you will see them do this time and time again. They're going to attempt to show the flaws and contradictions in your epistemology while at the same time avoiding the errors and flaws in theirs. Now, since presuppositionalism is built around deduction from Scripture, let's talk a little bit about arguments. Now, what is an argument? It's an attempt to provide a compelling offer of a true conclusion. And this is the important part. For an argument to demonstrate truth, it must be sound. A sound argument contains two elements. First of all, its form is valid, and secondly, its premises are true. Now, if an argument lacks either of these two things, it is not considered to be sound. First of all, let's talk about validity. A syllogism is valid if there is no way for the premise to be true and the conclusion to be false. In other words, the conclusion follows the premises. Now note that validity says absolutely nothing about the truthfulness of its premises, and this is a very important point. Let's take probably the most famous syllogism of all time. All men are mortal. Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. Now notice there is no way for the premises of this syllogism to be true and the conclusion to be false. That's what makes it valid. Now let's look at another syllogism. All dogs have fleas. Vinny is a dog, therefore Vinny has fleas. Now, although this syllogism is valid, is it sound? In other words, are the premises true? Now let's talk about true conclusions. If the argument's form is valid but its premises are false, is a true conclusion guaranteed? Obviously not. Now we know that all dogs do not have fleas. Therefore, there's no guarantee that Vinny has fleas. And I will come back to this in just a moment. But the problem for deduction is that a conclusion is only as good as its premises. If the premises are false, the conclusion is suspect. Now, since not all premises can be deduced, how do we know that they're true? Well, it's important to note that premises that are not deduced cannot be proven. However, you can still make judgments about their truthfulness. We do this every day of our life. Now let's discuss axioms for a moment. And I did an entire video on the Bible is not an axiom, and if you haven't viewed it, I'm going to put a link to the side, so please go and look at it. But basically, axioms are self-evident propositions that are not deduced. And let me give you three examples: existence, identity, and consciousness. Axioms are unique propositions in that their denial is self-refuting. And what I mean by that is that in order for you to deny an axiom, you must use it as a premise in your denial of it. So although axioms are not proven, axioms can still be judged by their self-refuting denial. How do you go about judging premises that were not deduced? Well, first of all, you need to ask yourself, is this in conflict with what I believe or know to be true? In other words, is there compelling evidence to the contrary? And secondly, is it internally consistent or does it contradict itself? See, because if something is not internally consistent or it contradicts itself, it cannot be true. Presuppositionalists say that your ability to make good judgments is impaired. Therefore, when it comes to Scripture, you must suspend your judgment and accept it as truth. Now, when you do this, validity then becomes the only property required in their mind to guarantee a true conclusion. Does this make any sense? Let's go back to our example. All dogs have fleas. Vinny is a dog. Vinny has fleas. I actually checked Vinny this morning before I made this video, and Vinny does not have fleas. So what's the problem here? I mean, the syllogism is obviously valid, but the conclusion appears to be false. Now, a common sense skeptic would conclude that one of the premises is false. Either all dogs don't have fleas or Vinny isn't a dog. But I believe that Vinny is a dog. I have pretty good evidence of that fact. So I have to conclude that not all dogs have fleas. Now let's look at what a presuppositionalist would do. See, a presuppositionalist would look at this and say the problem is with the evidence and not with the premise. See, whatever it is that the presuppositionalist has presupposed, he or she believes it to be absolute truth regardless. And in our example, since all dogs have fleas, Vinny must have them as well. So, either the observer doesn't know what a flea is, or doesn't know how to look for one. Is presuppositionalism really rational? See, although presuppositionalists attempt to show errors and contradictions in the epistemology of others, the same rules don't seem to apply to them. When I show a contradiction or error in Scripture, the presuppositionalist simply ignores it. Is this rational? Here is my challenge. When presented with an alleged error or contradiction in Scripture, the presuppositionalist must provide adequate evidence as to why his or her opponent is wrong. If the reply is simply, "You just don't understand," then his or her argument is unsound and you need to call him on it.
Sick and tired of hearing things from uptight, short-sighted, narrow-minded hypocritics. All I want is the truth. Just give me some truth. I've had enough of